Uncle Scratch, Daddy, why is Mommy so cold? I asked, my voice trembling with confusion and fear. She was dead. I knew that much, but why was she so cold? My father, a stout man named Gregory, remained silent. Everyone knows we die. Not even children deny it. Yet knowing a fact and believing it are different. I knew my mother lay dead in her casket. My father had explained the custom of a wake to me in advance. Yet while I was old enough to acknowledge death, I was too young to believe my mother could die. We did not speak on the drive home. As we passed between houses, I thought the vacant windows resembled my mother's empty eyes. I hardly breathed, and my father dared not look at me. We moved not long after. That was when I began seeing monsters. My father made his living as an event coordinator. He originally focused on local events, mainly weddings. After my mother's death, he began coordinating large-scale festivals and trade shows. This required him to travel across the country. Often we would rent a new house, but never spend enough time there to settle down. As a result, I never formed strong attachments or friendships. However, I saw plenty of monsters. Each new home contained some dark presence, be it a ghoulish face in the bedroom window, a cold spot in the basement, or creaking in the attic. My father insisted the claws in the moonlight were only gnarled trees. He told me he saw the silhouettes of cobwebs on the staircase, not ghosts. Our humid cellar contained insects, not demons. That did not explain the dank smell in the kitchen of our next home. I thought it was a vampire. I warned my father that it must sleep under the sink, for lack of a coffin. It bode its time until night, I whispered, when it slunk out to drink our blood. Our latest home was different, though. Even when I saw its photograph, I felt uneasy. The emotion almost did not exist, save for my vaguest contemplation. The fear only appeared when we arrived in person. It was sunset. My father stood outside the car. He admired the house from the curb before rushing indoors. I studied every inch. I gazed from the gables to the garden. My eyes found an upstairs window, soon to be my bedroom. There I saw Uncle Scratch, dimly lit from below as the sun melted behind the clouds. His form was visible in the dying light, yet his features remained hidden. My expression bore no surprise. I was experienced at recognizing monsters. They were all worrisome, yet I knew Uncle Scratch would be the first. Most monsters were eager to reveal their presence. Their hideous faces quickly appeared in my nightmares. That day, I only saw Uncle Scratch's moss-colored eyes. Then he left the window pane and submerged into darkness. In other ways, Uncle Scratch was like any monster. He appeared at night and resided within the bedroom closet. I took care to keep it spotless. Monsters are less inclined to haunt clean spaces. During the first night, Uncle Scratch's stare confronted me. His mossy eyes betrayed an insatiable hunger. I knew that Uncle Scratch did not care for flesh. He wanted something more, and I feared it was worse. I owned a nightlight. It was a gift from my mother, and it comforted me in other homes. I tried to use it here, but it was disturbing to have a light illuminating Uncle Scratch. I cringed at the sight of the slimy rats. Uncle Scratch's gloved hands stroked them as they writhed. His touch was never gentle. They scurried over his suit, clashing with his unwrinkled tie and spotless white gloves. This cleanliness amplified the rat's repulsiveness. Once, a rat attempted to issue a warning. It told me not to accept Uncle Scratch's treats. Before it finished, Uncle Scratch pulled the rat away. He dropped it into his pocket by its tail. I heard it squeal as it disappeared. Then Uncle Scratch spoke to me. His whisper was coaxing, almost friendly. He offered me a treat, but I did not accept. Uncle Scratch left, promising to bring me another surprise tomorrow. I shuddered, for monsters never spoke. They waited until I fell asleep before venturing forward. Waking chased them away. Uncle Scratch could not be frightened so easily. Every night I heard him beckon. Uncle Scratch proved strenuous for my father as well. "Go to bed," he ordered as he listened to the radio. "But Daddy, Uncle Scratch will be up there," I sobbed. "He'll show me some candy or a toy. He'll try to get me. Please, Daddy." It's getting harder to resist him every night. He just won't ever give up. "Your obsession with monsters is tiresome," sighed my father. "It's those pulp magazines you read. If they hadn't belonged to your mother, I'd have burned the lot to ashes." I listened for a moment until the ball game on the radio returned. My father turned away to enjoy it. I hated sports. I never understood why my father fussed over them. Sighing, I went upstairs for bed. As I departed, my father called after me, "Remember to brush your teeth." After 3 steps, I stopped. I studied the stairs. In an earlier house, Lady Swoon Moon made similar sounds. I remembered her long teeth. She painted them like candy canes with the blood of children. To me, each creak was the sound of munching. I visualized her crouched over the bones of innocent victims. I quaked in fear. I ran up the stairs and saw the bathroom door. It was a foot from my bedroom. I needed to relieve myself. The bathroom seemed miles away. I stepped forward and heard a creak. My bedroom door was open and a rat scurried out. "Don't listen to him, Maurice," it squeaked. "He told me there'd be a dollhouse." The rat never finished. The door opened wider and Uncle Scratch's hand shot forward. He clutched the rat and dragged it into the bedroom. It screamed in the voice of a young girl. The door shut, and Uncle Scratch's eye materialized in the keyhole. It stared at me lustfully. I bolted into the bathroom and slammed the door. I quivered on the toilet seat for hours. Eventually, my eyes shut and I fell asleep. Meanwhile, my closet door opened and Uncle Scratch crept out. Through the bathroom keyhole, he studied me. His expression sparkled with anticipation. "Soon," he whispered as his tongue massaged his lips. My father had fallen asleep listening to his radio. He awoke suddenly, and his lips parted in fear. He studied his radio vacantly. A rerun of Lights Out was playing. He switched it off, while his free hand fumbled into his pocket for matches. Quivering, he lit his pipe. "Good Lord," he whispered to himself. "What a nightmare." His face sunk as he remembered fragments of his dream. Gloved hands, rats, and mossy eyes. Someone he knew was screaming in that dream. Someone young. "I better check on Maurice," he whimpered to himself. He trod up the stairs, through the hallway, and into my room. "My God!" he exclaimed upon entering. He stood staring, his hand frozen on the doorknob. Toys littered the floor, but my bed was empty. His face paled. Then he heard snoring from outside. The bathroom light was on, and he sighed with relief. He smiled as he opened the bathroom door and saw me sleeping. "That's my boy," he sighed. His arms sagged with my weight as he lifted me. My eyes fluttered while he carried me to my bedroom. They half opened as the blanket swished over me, before closing once more. Hours later, I awoke. I silently cursed my foolishness and wondered how I got into bed. In the darkness, a noise sounded. Yet it was not rats scurrying or children moaning. It was a human voice. I was still, corpse-like. The noise broke the silence like ice cracking. I drew a silent breath and listened closer. There was silence, then a whine. A long sob emerged before the silence returned. I turned my head. The moon outside had disappeared, and the room was black. Another murmur. There was no mistake. Someone was weeping. Was this Uncle Scratch? I had never heard a monster cry, not even as a trick. A wet sound followed, like a bucket collecting rain. I visualized tears streaming down a woman's face. Another sob. It was nearer now. The dripping continued, accentuated by occasional moans. The sound was feminine. I remembered my mother, and my eyes watered. I debated turning on my lamp. Uncle Scratch would have offered a treat by now. I reached toward the switch, but stopped. There was a fumbling, then a sob near my ear. In fear, I drew back my hand and the noise ceased. I did not lie down. I feared the presence would hear my mattress. In the dark, something slithered. I sensed the presence under my bed. Sweat tickled my chin, but I was too frightened to wipe it away. The voice returned. It wept under the bed in a constant stream. Did it want my attention? I ventured a question. "Why are you crying?" I asked. The sound ceased, and I heard a soft creaking as something crawled out from under the bed. There was silence until a huddled mass formed over the window. "Maurice," the mass whimpered. "Is that you?" I turned pale. It sounded like my mother. Suddenly, a blue light jarred the mass into a straight stance. I saw that it was indeed my mother. The light emanated from wires fastened to her skull. She floated before me like a specter. I titled my head and noticed Uncle Scratch illuminated in the corner. His mossy eyes stared at my mother viciously. After several jolts, she floated limply in the air. Uncle Scratch lifted a hammer and an ice pick for me to see. Casually, he strode nearer while I watched helplessly. Floundering electric sparks from the wires occasionally tore through the darkness. In these moments, I watched Uncle Scratch set the hammer down on my bedside table. Uncle Scratch pulled back my mother's left eyelid. Slowly, he inserted the ice pick over the top of her eyeball. He carefully slid it deeper until it hit bone. He retrieved his hammer, and with 2 taps, he broke through the thin layer of skull. I observed Uncle Scratch scraping behind it. Another 2 taps and more scraping behind the other eyeball, and Uncle Scratch discarded his tools. He turned back to me. "That's what they did to her, Maurice," Uncle Scratch whispered. "They didn't even bother to get a doctor to do it, just some staff member. Then they turned her loose, and she took a tumble down the stairs. We both know how that turned out, don't we?" The blue crackles died with the last of Uncle Scratch's words. I sat in thick darkness. I groped back in bed when I heard Uncle Scratch's sinister voice in the blackness. "I can bring her back, Maurice," he said. "There will be a price, but nothing worthwhile is ever free. Just say yes." The sound of rats scuttling behind the walls appeared. A mixture of fear and loneliness consumed me. I wondered if Uncle Scratch could restore my mother. If so, what would remain of her? There was hardly a sound when I whispered, "Yes." In a flash, the room was empty. I turned on my light and checked under the bed for my mother. I found her sprawled on the floor, gibbering mindlessly. I crawled under the bed and lay with her. We wept and exchanged horrified glances. She opened her mouth to speak, but only drool dripped out. Uncle Scratch had restored her flesh, but her mind was another matter. Moments later, Uncle Scratch's hand snuck under the bed and pulled me away. He locked me in the closet where I was alone with the rats. Uncle Scratch forbade me from calling to my mother, and then whispered, "It's time to pay that price I mentioned." When a child disappears, questioning the parents is routine police work. The officers escorted my father from our home. From the car, he had one glance at the house. He looked upwards and gazed at the window to my bedroom. Before the police car departed, he saw a rat on the windowsill. For some reason, the sight disturbed him. It was just as well that his hearing was only average. Had he keen ears, he would have heard a voice squealing, "Daddy, help me. Please, Daddy."